All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Unnormalized Podcast. This is your host, Frankie A. And today I am joined with a super dope guest that I've been very eager to get on. Today I'm joined with James Payton, who actually a lot of people may know from his role as Frank Longbottom in Harry Potter. He also played the infamous role of Hitler in Captain America's The First Avenger. He was in A List of Angels, Robin Hood. So welcome to the show, James. I appreciate you being on, buddy.
Oh, it's very kind of you to have me. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Cool. So, James, let's start with, I think it's really cool when we speak to guests that we talk about a little bit about their history and kind of like where they've come from. So tell me a little bit of backstory about who James is.
Well, there's a documentary coming out this year, so you might find out more there. Sorry, people texting. So I am originally from England, from a small town called Cheltenham, which is in the West Country, sort of near Bristol. I grew up there. And when I was 12 years old, my father died, and he died of cancer, which is terribly dull, but it's quite popular, I believe. And the abiding memory of that, I mean, this is back in the 1980s. I'm quite old. The abiding memory, well, thanks. It's a lot of CGI. The abiding memory of that day, aside from obviously, my father dying, was in the afternoon. I was sort of absentmindedly watching television, as people sort of came round to pay their condolences and so forth. And I was watching a black and white movie, which I later discovered was called Francis, with an actor called Donald O'Connor. And Francis is about Donald O'Connor and a talking donkey. And as I said, I was absentmindedly watching this movie, and I found myself laughing. And I had this sort of epiphany, if you like, that I realised that this film that was made in 1950, 25 years before I was born, could take me out of my grief, albeit for a spell. And I thought, crikey, I want to do that. This thing has got the power, this flickering image has got the power to sort of help. So I thought, well, I sort of, maybe I could do that. Turns out I couldn't, but I still try anyway. And that was sort of where it started, I suppose. But I'm from this place that we didn't have movie studios, or there's nobody in my family who was involved in the entertainment industry. So I went through my schooling. I went to university because I thought that's what you did, all the while knowing that this is what I was going to do. This is the thing that I wanted to do. And then I as I was still at university, I started doing a TV show called Special People down in Gloucestershire. And I got that because I replied to a newspaper advert. Back then, it still exists today. There's a newspaper called The Stage, which deals with comings and goings in theatre and TV and film in the UK. And there was an advert in there. This is back in the 90s, and I replied to it, and I got involved in this TV show that was supposed to be shown in Germany, an English language show in Germany. And we started shooting it, and it was all terribly low budget. The executive producer turned out to be a paedophile. So that got canned. Yeah, that
Whoa.
was. Yeah, so that was sort of quite the entry. Well, so yeah, that all got sort of canned and taken away. And I don't think he ever really got his just desserts, that chap. Which is unfortunate, but he certainly never worked. Which is good, and we all did. We all spoke to the police and gave our statements and so on. And I believe he got away on some sort of technicality. still sort of rankles. But there we are.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So yeah, even to this day, people need to be safe and aware of who they're working with. And
Now, James, how old were you when all of this took place?
Oh God, 20 something, maybe 20, 21.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you go through this initial experience of entry into the entertainment business, and run into something like this, which is like a horror story for anyone or any other like family member that we would want to get into the business. This was not the way to kind of go about it. So like, how did your family react after you had this experience? Even at age 20, it's alarming. Um,
Yeah.
how did they react to you saying, like, I've had this troubling experience my first time out of the gates, but I kind of still want to do it. You know what I mean? Like, how did your family support systems and friends kind of react to you saying, yeah, I'm gonna still persevere and I'm gonna kind of make this my thing?
I think, well, but I mean, a lot of the cast and crew were quite close, so we'd all spoken about it, and um, that for all the stories that you hear, it's still very rare that this happens, and I because that's what I'd started, and this project went on for certainly a little while before anything came out.
Mm,
Um, by which time I'd started doing other stuff as well. So this wasn't my sole thing that I was involved in. So I was doing this one show, but also sort of trying to do whatever I could,
sure.
while still sort of finishing university and all that sort of malarkey. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just sort of one of those things that you say, okay, so this isn't the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me personally, but it really wasn't about me. It was about the people that he hurt.
Hmm.
That was more of our concern than anything about what we'd go on to do or what would happen to us. It wasn't. We knew that it was certainly an unusual situation, but it wasn't really something that we thought that would affect us or our careers or what we all decided we wanted to do. It was more, making sure that the people who've been affected to it by him
Mm.
were going to be okay.
Yeah.
I used to say it's a long time ago now, and they never really got closure. But yeah, it's unfortunate. But I moved on. I moved to London, I think in '99, knowing a couple of people that I'd been to university with, that sort of thing, and thought, crikey, I should just sort of try and break in.
Mm.
So I, obviously it was relatively early days in terms of the internet and all that sort of stuff. So I joined the various websites that you're supposed to join. I was in the Actors Union over here, Equity. So I joined that. My professional name was saved, so nobody else can have my professional name, as it were. I joined Spotlight, which is the casting directory in this country. That if you're an actor in the UK and you're not on Spotlight, then you're not taken seriously. So
Mm-hmm.
and then I started to reply to things in newspapers, and I started to go to auditions for short films from students or from other experienced people, and I just kept saying yes, or I said yes more than perhaps more than I should have done, given some of my past performances. Yeah, I said yes a lot, and then I became, without really thinking about it, I became a Londoner. I became someone who lives here, and that became my life.
Mm.
So yeah, it was all sort of, it didn't happen at me. It was something that I sort of wanted to do. So I set my mind to doing it, and here we are 20 odd years later, and I'm still setting my mind to doing it.
Yeah.
Everything has changed, but nothing has changed. I still have to fight for every job, every casting, every audition, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
It's But I've been very fortunate in the stuff that I've been able to do. And it's certainly been a bit of a cakewalk. It's been quite a journey
Yeah.
to this point.
And I love how when I'm talking to people like yourself, James, the reason why I have guests on is because of the fact that I think and I've said this numerous times in other interviews that I've had, that no matter where you live, we kind of set ourselves up for, I think all of us have this inner gift that we are born with. And sometimes we negate listening to that inner voice telling us that we should do certain things, that we were born with special talents, let's say. And we kind of go through more of like a conventional route of things, like getting a 9 to 5 job, or doing something that we think our families would want us to do. And it becomes, for lack of a better term, kind of like a normalized way of living through life, just kind of like floating through and doing what we think we're supposed to be doing. But when what I find fascinating is, talking to people like yourself, James, is that that's not always the only route that you have to take. There are other routes that are unconventional, which I call, and which is the name of the show, Unnormalized, routes of doing things, but able to do them successfully. And when I mean by success, I don't mean like monetary and all that, but a feeling of purpose, a feeling of value, a feeling of listening to that inner voice, and working towards that. And I love how you say that you've been in the business for 20 odd years, and you're still fighting for roles and things like that. Because I think that keeps the part of that is like hunger. And I think hunger is, especially in your field as an actor, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it lends to us, the audience, watching you as the actor, a more richer performance in the roles that you're playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a fair point. Actually, I do remember you many years ago going to see a financial advisor, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm an actor." And he said, "What are you going to do? Just do it till you're 30, and if you haven't made it by then, do something else." And I said, "Well, no, I'll do it until I stop loving it, and that might be tomorrow, but it might never happen."
Hmm.
But, so for me, it's I never made the millions, or I haven't up to this point, or but and sometimes it's been financially, yes, of course, down the years it's been a struggle, and who's to say at the
Yeah,
moment things are okay, but in 6 months they might not be. So
yeah,
it's a feast or famine business. So you sort of need to be ready to accept that. And going down the sort of 9 to 5 you were talking about earlier was never on my radar. I knew that I couldn't. I don't. Maybe if I had to, if it was forced upon me, I suppose it would. I'd have to, but it wasn't something that was on my radar. It was something that I wanted to stay well away from,
hmm,
because I knew that it wouldn't give me any satisfaction. And the people that can do the sort of the 9 to 5 and the jobs, and the people that take satisfaction from doing those, amazing. But
yeah,
it's just not somehow I'm wired
hmm,
that I that it would. It's it would. I think it would take me into a quite a dark place. As I said, I didn't grow up in London, but I've spent most of my life here. The majority of my life I've spent in London, and certainly for me that was very much the plan. Sort of finishing university where I was at the time, and thinking, okay, what do I do now? So I moved back with my mum, and I was on a bus, and I remember being on a bus, thinking, okay, so this is what I want to do, but how am I going to achieve that? I'm not going to achieve it here, so I need to move to London. And that was the sort of the moment of going, yeah, well, obviously that's what you need to do. So stop, kicking your heels and thinking that something's going to happen here, and get to where it is going to happen or has the potential to happen. So I sort of packed my bag and found a tiny, tiny bedroom, sort of a 5 by 6 bedroom to live in. And then, then you've got London on your doorstep and you're ready to see if it'll accept you. And I'm still waiting to see if it will. I'm still here. I'm still going. Because the thing is, somebody gives up every day. Somebody stops doing it every day. And that might be because they've fallen out of love with it. It might be because financially they can't do it anymore, or for any number of reasons. But I'm sort of at a point where I've gone all in, really. I'm in my late 20s now. Well, I'm 44, so I'm in it now.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere else I'd rather be. This, as much as it sounds a little bit twee, it sort of chose me. So I have to. It's not something I can't do. I have to do it. There's sort of a burning desire for me to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm any good at it, but there's still a burning desire to do it. And fortunately, I've managed to busk and caper my way to make a living and provide for the people I need to provide for.
Well, I would have to disagree with you on the not, being good to stay in the industry, and that brings me to something that most people who don't know me on this show but know me off the show. I am a huge, huge Potter fan. And
Quite popular, I believe. I believe that that's quite a popular thing.
yeah, it's almost like well, it's not almost like, it's a subculture of people who really were invested and are invested in the novels, and especially the movies, because the movies just brought the novels to life. So how did you land the role as Frank Longbottom in Harry Potter?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that it means so much to people. And when you meet people from all around the world, when you're all around the world doing Comic Cons or whatever, it would be very easy to be cynical about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at people's faces and what it means to people, and I defy you to be cynical because it means so much. And to me, it's quite how I've got into that world is a bit of a mystery, but it's wonderful. People are so kind. It's an incredible thing. But I work as a stand-in and a cast reader on some big movies. And at the time, I was doing a movie called Atonement. This is back in 2006. So I was looking after James McAvoy, Keira Knightley, Joe Wright movie. It was well known for a 5-minute Steadicam shot, which is an incredible piece of cinema in itself. So I got a call from David Yates' office. David, his first one was over at Pheonix. That's the first one he directed. And they said David would like to see you for Harry Potter. And I said, that's very kind, but I'm busy. And they said, yeah, what? I said, I'm sorry, I'm working at that. And they said, oh, okay. Now, that was the end of that, until they called the following day. And I said, I don't think you realise David wants to see you and only you for this. So I spoke to the first assistant director, who is Josh Robertson, who's still a friend of mine to this day. And he said, it's fine, you go and we'll cover you for that night, because we were doing nights in the east of England. So I did a night shoot, I think, that night. Then I travelled down from where I was to Leavesden, where they shot the Potter movies and the Fantastic Beasts movies. We shoot them there. And so on No Sleep did this screen test, full screen test with costume and makeup and Lisa Wood, who played Alice, to go through this little screen test with David and sort of try and figure out in this very short amount of time, because then obviously the scene in St Mungo's had gone by that point. How the best way to get across not only Neville's love for his parents, which obviously Matt did so well in the movie, but also Frank and Alice's love for their son and of course for each other. So how we could get that across in such a short period of time using no words, just using our physicality, and we sort of worked it out that it would be, this sort of swelling pride to see what Neville had achieved. Obviously, the love of a parent to a child is unsurpassable, and then to get across the sort of love that they have for each other, we essentially did that in just a beat of when Alice looks back to camera, then I just do a double take to her, and it's sort of played. It's in that 20 seconds, it was just enough to say I love you too. And I think that it's a moment. It's a very, very brief moment, but it's an important moment for Neville, and obviously because that's the only time you see them. So I'd done the screen test, and they was like, yeah, David's happy with that. That's great. So you can come in. So I went in, and I think I came in for the costume and makeup day. By which point I'd finished on the Atonement film, and I think we shot in maybe September of 2006, something like that. Which was a day which we turned up and we shot the thing, and the relevant parties were all there, and I remember seeing Michael Gambon, who I'd known from a thing that I'd done with the BBC years before. He said, can I swear? I'm gonna. He said, fuck me, you get around, don't you? I do. And then that was sort of it. And then I thought it might be a little bit of a boost for my career to have sort of been in that sort of movie. So the next year the movie comes out, I go and see it, and I go, oh yeah, there's me on the big screen. That's nice. And then I did not think for a second that however many years later, 13 years later, 13 years, maths, that's how maths work, that I'd still be talking about it, still be meeting people, still be, sort of made friends with people who were in more of the movies, and for it to mean so much to people. So for me to still be part of the wizarding world with my work on Fantastic Beasts, it's amazing. I never thought that this one tiny thing that I'd done would become such a major part of my career, but I'm ever grateful that it did, because the opportunities that it gives you, not necessarily financial, not necessarily in terms of work, but in terms of the people that you get to meet and what it means to them, and to hear their stories, because everybody has a story.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about life is that everybody's story is fascinating. Maybe not to them themselves, but to other people. So the fact that I'm still talking about it and being involved in the wizarding world is it's staggering, but it's brilliant. I wouldn't change it.
Oh, absolutely, and we wouldn't want to have that change at all. I mean, the stuff that we're seeing that's coming out, like Fantastic Beasts, and I recently saw Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway in New York City, and yeah, oh, it's phenomenal, phenomenal, and more than I can put into words. Um, it's just I don't know if it's something about the whole Wizarding World culture that kind of takes you in and out of being a child and your inner child and being an adult and watching these characters grow into from young guys and girls and into growing into themselves and adults. It's a really good way for a message to send to generations um, about that journey and how we all have, those conflicting decisions that we have to make in our lives, to kind of shape us and mold us into who we are as a person.
Oh,
um,
thank you.
it,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me because I was already an adult watching it. My son was into it. He's now 18, and I have young nieces and nephews who are like 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and just tapping into the Wizarding World. And it's, I think, something that's going to withstand time and generations. Some of those great classic movies that we have. That I can kind of like attribute it to, like things like E.T. and things like that, that the generations just constantly, like Star Wars, that whole culture kind of just, goes from generation to generation and still has an impactful message that it leaves on the generations. It's phenomenal. It's really phenomenal, and I think be, being part of that must be so special as an actor. Like you said, it's one thing to just be in a movie, have a part, and you see yourself on the screen, and then it's okay, fine and dandy. But then you have something like this, where it's just like magic in a bottle, and it must be so rewarding, as forget money and all that kind of stuff, but as an actor, James, it must be so rewarding to see your work as part of that.
Yeah, yeah, it very much is. Even though it's a tiny part of the movies themselves, it's something that tiny part was something that we worked on to sell it,
Hmm.
to make people believe it, to sell the emotion to it. And most of that's down to Matt, really. But I'm proud of the way that it turned out. I'm proud of what we came up with, we what with David and Lisa Wood, who's Alice, what we came up with to sell that emotion in such a short period of time is, yeah, it's a really proud moment because it works.
Yeah.
And most of the time I watch myself and go, oh, okay, that was a choice. But as you say, I was 30 when I did that, so I was theoretically a man. Um, so yeah, it's a lot's happened since then. Yeah,
So James, let's talk to me about, okay, because I mentioned your role in the First Avenger, and
yeah,
so you go from playing this lovable, very endearing father figure, um, to one of the most loving and endearing um, characters in Harry Potter. And then you're switched, and you get into the most infamous role that you probably could possibly play as a human being, as Hitler. So I guess that's just the testament to who you are as an actor. So what is that like with like fans? So when you see fans in, you talked about Comic Con, so fans know you from Harry Potter, and then they know your stuff from like the Avengers. So like, what is the reaction to fans when they kind of say, okay, like this guy is good, but he plays like Hitler?
I mean, some people want to punch you, you know, recreate the punch, which I'm always happy to do. Some people collect autographs of actors who've played Hitler.
Mm.
Um, that's their sort of thing, which again, that's why not. It's a select bunch of people. But I'm playing the USO version of Hitler, so it's Hitler plus. The idea is to parody the man, so we can recreate the first comic book cover, which was released before the states entered the war. So if anything tells you that comic books are not political or shouldn't be political, you can refer them back to that and tell them to wind their necks in. Because it's a very, very important thing in the history of comic books and of course in American history as well. It's a massively brave decision for Jack Kirby and so forth to do that comic book. But it is, it's the people that sort of know me from Potter, who may not know that I've worked elsewhere, are either slightly surprised. Oh God! So you're in two big franchises. I was like, well, we didn't know at the time. When we were shooting First Avenger, we didn't know that Marvel was going to become a massive thing. I mean, obviously Marvel sort of had an idea that they were going to do it. But I remember we were shooting at a studio. We shot in several studios over here. One of which is Longcross, which is a former MOD, Ministry of Defence facility in Surrey that is, not really a studio, and it's horrible to work at. But don't tell them I said that. It is terrible. Well, it's not fine, but it'll shut up. So Barry Curtis, when I was cast, Barry Curtis, who was the head of Marvel Security, he says to me, "Well, now you're cast, you get to see something." I was like, "Okay." So he took me away into this hidden room that was just filled with previous pictures of some of the scenes they were going to shoot or had shot, miniatures of sets, and all of these amazing sort of beautifully designed pictures and all manner of incredible stuff. It was sort of like a Marvel fan's wet dream, if you like. He said, "You can't take pictures, but it's important that you see this." So he took me over to the wall and he said, "You see that there?" I was like, "Yeah, that's you." I was like, "Oh, that's rather nice, isn't it?" And then in the 10 years since that movie came out, or since the 10 years since we shot that movie, Marvel has become quite the thing. So, I'm fully expecting them at some point to go, what we haven't covered is, the US soldier who played Hitler in the shows. We could do his story, couldn't we? We could do his story where he's in the army, the war finishes, and he carries on with his acting career, and maybe does some stage shows, maybe has some little parts in some black and white movies. Not that I'm grasping, Marvel, if you're watching. But
this is the Marvel. This is the pitch.
But it's the reaction from people is sometimes they do a double take because they can't believe it's the same person. But the moustache was real, which is fine on set. But when you have to go on your daily routine, nipping to the store or whatever, it's not quite the same. When you've got a Hitler moustache and a Hitler haircut, people tend to look at you funny. People tend to there's sort of several reactions. People either draw their children closer to them and scurry away. Some people laugh. Some people do double takes and look massively confused. And some people want to talk to you and say, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah.
And because you can't, at the time you say I can't say that I'm doing a Marvel movie. So I told people that I was doing a Chaplin retrospective.
Very, very close similarities
Yeah,
in
yeah.
physical appearance.
I thought I'd go with that, and see, whether or not people bought it, I don't know, but they soon moved on. But yeah, it was sort of it was a funny thing because I auditioned for something else. So I'd known Joe Johnston, who directed First Avenger, from The Wolfman, where I was covering Anthony Hopkins. And when they came back to the UK to shoot that movie, they said to me, "You want to come and look after a couple of the actors on that?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, fine, great." So I came along and we started the movie, and then a little way into it, they said, "Do you want to audition for something?" And I said, "Great, yeah, fine, love to, thank you." And it was sort of a one-liner that when Steve's having the Vita rays done, it's a one-liner, and he says something like "vital signs normal," something like that. So I did that. They put me on tape, and that was fine. And Joe saw it and said, "Oh yeah, great, James can do that." So the process then is that you have a little show and tell, the costume you're going to wear, the makeup look, and all that sort of thing. So I went in and had a haircut, and they shaved all this down to just a moustache. Slicked my hair, and I put on a 1940s suit, and I go in to show Joe. Of course, I'm going through set, so all the people that I know on set are going, "You look like a Nazi," which is flattering in no way.
Yeah.
And people kept saying, "Oh, you look like Hitler." Well, I'm not quite sure the response you're supposed to give to that, but there we are. So and Joe saw me and laughed, and then not so long later, they came to me and they said, "How would you feel about playing Hitler? Because you haven't cast that, and we think you'd be great." And I said, "Okay." So I said yes, and that was all fine. So then, of course, I now have another show and tell where I'm dressing as Adolf Hitler with the sort of Hugo Boss outfit that they've got for me, and these amazing boots that I can get on by myself, but I can't get them off. So my dresser was a chap called Mark Holmes, who I've known for many, many years. He's lovely Mark Holmes. So he had to help me off with the boots. But I go in and they, then we shave the rest of the moustache up until the famous bit. It's coloured in, and then they added a little piece for my hair, because it's going. Then I go and do a show and tell with Joe, and he bursts out laughing because I look like it, which is great. But then it comes to the point where I've got to actually give a performance.
Mm-hmm.
So I go away and I go, how am I playing this? I can't, it's a comedy performance. It has to be real, but also sort of heightened. So I went back and I looked on YouTube at some of Hitler's most famous speeches, to sort of try and find his mannerisms, his sort of that weird resting bitch face that he sort of had, and tried to amp it up into parody, because the best way to sort of pop someone's pomposity is through parody.
Yeah.
Because obviously he was a truly terrible person, and we're mocking him. That's how you can sort of get rid of the people like that, is or you can help by mocking them and taking away the fear.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can laugh at them. So then I deleted my internet history because I thought probably that's the best. And then we shot the USO scene with the Alan Silvestri song, which I had in my head for a year afterwards. The Star Spangled Man. We shot that in the in the Hackney Empire in London, not too far away from where I used to live, oddly enough. And everything. So it says Chicago, Pittsburgh. It was all just different set dressing in the same place. So we didn't exactly travel for that. And I sort of, we came. I think I had 3 days of dance rehearsals with all the girls, to try and figure out what we were going to do with this. And and then we did something completely different from what we did in the rehearsal. And then I remember standing in the wings, about to come out and do the sort of the backwards walk, and then it sort of tilts up to
Mm-hmm.
my face, and then we pan across, and and I thought, well, how on earth am I doing? How on earth am I in this massive Hollywood movie with Captain America? And it was bizarre, but I came out and we did it, and people laughed, and I thought, well, no note's a good note.
Mm-hmm.
It's that actor's thing of going, am I doing it right?
Yeah.
Because we're delicate little snowflakes, really, and we do need constant reassurance that we're amazing and wonderful and charming. Um, so the thing is that when you get a note from the director, that means he wants to help your performance, and Joe's very good at that. But I didn't get any notes, so of course that's a good sign. You don't get a note; they're happy with what you're doing. In the actor's head, it's, my God, they think I'm so bad, they can't even give me a note. There's no hope. That's a paranoia. But, when it is what it is. But yeah, then we sort of shot that stuff over a week or something, with that Star Spangled Man song in my head constantly. Um, then we finished, and we all sort of went our separate ways to do whatever next. And you go, okay, great, that's something to look forward to. That'll be fun. And I remember going to the screening of the movie when it came out the following year, and knowing that this scene was going to come up, and hoping that it was going to play, that it was going to work. My little heart was sort of thumping away, going, did I overdo it? But it came out, and then people were laughing and cheering and clapping, and it might be because they knew me, but let's go with it. It was very good. And then it just sort of, it happened, and then it was, I suppose my value of the Comic-Cons increased because I did two different movies that people saw, not the other movies that nobody saw, but the two big ones that people are familiar with.
And this is how my mind works, James. Is you started out this interview, you were telling me a sobering story about how film impacted you in a moment of something really deep and heavy, that obviously probably changed your whole course of life, when
Well,
you were losing your dad, and you saw the film, and you laughed, and it took you out of that moment. I have to think that the same would be true if there was somebody in the audience, maybe who has a history with maybe a family member or something to that effect, who was going through that whole Nazi era kind of situation, under the Nazi Reich, and maybe in that moment of heaviness of all that comes with the history of that it could have brought a light to, you said the parody of somebody that um, horrific and notorious, in our world's history. To parody them is to take the fear away. Possibly there was maybe somebody in the audience or somebody watching the film at home that comes up and maybe does for them what the film that you saw, as a young guy, did for you. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my head,
yeah,
that's how I would view, um, you know, giving it back to the people who may be experiencing that heaviness that comes with, the history of the whole Nazi reign, and the terrible stuff that kind of happened to people, in that moment of our world's history. So, I guess that's what this. I always tell, especially people who are in the arts, who do music, or who are actors. I always say that you guys are like the storytellers, of our history, where we can kind of look back at things and, have different perspectives of situations. So I think this is like a wild perspective because we're so used to seeing such striking images and hearing, audio clips from his speeches on how it's really fucking intense sometimes when you see the stuff that we see when we attribute it to somebody like Hitler, especially because I don't think like iconically, for what, and I use that word loosely, you know um there's a figure in our world's history that the image or the sound doesn't invoke some intense feeling. And I can imagine, or I can't imagine, you walking through the streets while you're filming this, dressed as, or you know, looking as much as you can as Hitler, and that visceral reaction from people must have been startling. I can see why mothers would probably clutch their children, and just because it's such an intense visual thing that's kind of burnt into everyone's mind. No matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right on several counts there. I think in terms of that sort of circular nature of me being moved by something and taking me out of my grief, I'd love to think that it helped someone.
Hmm.
I'd love to think that sort of torch was sort of passed on somehow.
Yeah.
Um, and you're absolutely right. Hitler is in human history is an iconic character. Not certainly not in a good way, but the
Hmm.
fact that everybody over a certain age can do an impression just by putting their finger to their
Hmm.
top lip and then popping their arm out is that
Hmm.
instant recognizable thing says an awful lot about how much he and his terrible ideas changed the world.
Yeah.
Um, and here we are, many 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 years later, still fighting.
Hmm.
To some degree, it was still fighting sort of ignorance and willful ignorance and um, xenophobia and racism and all these sort of awful things that have no place in, as far as I see it, in a civilized society, because it's not right and it's not okay,
Hmm.
because people are people.
Yeah.
If you cut me, do I not bleed?
Yeah.
Um, and there's I challenge anybody to go across to the other side of the world from where they are and spend any amount of time with somebody who they don't speak the same language or have the same skin color or whatever it may be. And I challenge anyone to go across the world and not go, these people are just like me.
Hmm. Yeah.
We all have our own foibles and concerns and issues, and that's it. They talk about the universal truth. We all have that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. And James, so it's kind of segueing. My mind is going here. You and I had a brief kind of interaction over Brexit the other night when um, you guys were kind of everything. The countdown was going on, and I saw one of your social media posts, and it struck me because at the moment that you guys were going through that shift and change in your country's history, we were going through some stuff on the other side of the pond too. So just wanted to like get your thoughts on the whole Brexit kind of moment in history because it was two definitive moments that both of us were going through at simultaneously, and I found it fascinating that here's two different countries and then two different ways our countries were being impacted, that probably would change history forever. So what is just give me like what are some of your thoughts on the whole Brexit movement, and how are people reacting to it?
I mean, it's going to be fascinating to look back historically.
Yeah.
At it. I think if you go back 10 years, whatever it is, nobody really gave too much thought to us being in Europe. We were in Europe. We travel around Europe freely. We can go and work and live in other countries in Europe, and that's all well and good. But then sort of there's this groundswell, if you like, because people who have views that may not be incredibly tolerant tended to keep those opinions themselves. And there's a sort of groundswell of people thinking it was all right to say something that might be deemed offensive because of some skin or whatever it may be. And they're sort of emboldened by the people that they see, the Nigel Farages or the David Camerons or the Boris Johnsons or the Jacob Rees-Moggs or these all awful human beings who are out for themselves. And now, if here we are in 2020, and people are, as I say, are emboldened. When are you going back? What do you feel about having to go back? And that was never what it was about. It was about people going. It's about regaining sovereignty, whatever the fuck that means.
Yeah.
People are sort of spouting. People are spouting the things that they've heard. But for me, it's sort of, and I'm sure it's the same for you as well. It's that their thinking stops because they've read an article in one of the newspapers or online or somewhere, and they've gone, oh, well, that's what I think now. I don't need to think anymore. I don't need to think that I could go further with my thinking. I've made my decision. And it's this sort of blaming sort of thing of going, well, I can't get a great job because this fella who isn't the same colour as me has a great job. That's why I can't get that job. It's this is sort of boo-hoo me attitude. It's always somebody else's fault. The reason
Sure.
Somebody else's fault. And sometimes, I've been in terrible situations in my life, and sometimes that's been my fault. It's about sort of taking. But then you get people who are emboldened by this, and then spouting this sort of willful ignorance of, well, we can take control of our borders, for example. Now, in the UK, we've always had control of our borders. In fact, there's more immigration that comes from outside the EU into the UK than from inside the EU. So the numbers sort of don't add up. We've always had control of our international border.
Yeah.
But the Home Office in the UK decided not to use that power. So that power existed. We didn't use it. Okay. So then the people go, well, they're coming over here, they're taking our jobs, or they're not. Or they're taking our money, they're taking benefits and they're not putting into the country. I know a fellow who lives down the road who's of a different hue to me, and he's claiming benefits and makes out that he can't walk, but I see him playing football on a Sunday every day. And they're the thing that stops. They don't go, if I go the other way, I know a white person or a national, someone who was born in this country who's doing exactly the same thing. That they can't sort of get those things. But then you go, okay, well, let's look at the facts, because facts are really important, and they supersede feelings and opinion. You can have your own feelings, you can have your own opinion, but you don't get to have your own facts. So, in terms of all immigration that comes into this country, those people put in more to the country in taxes and national insurance than they take out. So the problem is, what? Well, I struggle to see it, but it's very, very convenient. And people say, well, we can start to make our own rules, like we already have. The EU isn't perfect, but change happens from within. So and I think it is because of, there's sort of a victimhood that they feel they're being persecuted, even though they're not. They feel it, and that's very, very, that's that sort of Yoda thing, isn't it? Anger leads to suffering, sort of thing. And it's this sort of blame. There's always somebody to blame. My life isn't as good as it should be because of that person, because of that person, because of whatever. And you sort of make in your own head these reasons why your life may not be as wonderful as somebody else is. And unfortunately, that's just sort of life.
Yeah.
People come up to me and say, "You must be a millionaire." I wish I were, but I'm not. Not even close to it. Not even. I mean, it's laughable how poor I am. Um, I have enough to to have a roof, which I don't own. I have a small car that I need for work, and to cover the things that I need to cover. My family and so forth. But I think and I think there's definitely parallels between what's happening in the US to over here, that this sort of rise of the right wing that is deeply concerning. But people together are very, very brave, aren't they? They can come and say, well, that person's saying he doesn't like black people or white people or whatever people, so now I can say it. So these voices sort of grow. And certainly on social media, which is certainly a bit of an echo chamber in some respects, that the people who shout the loudest get the most attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And certainly in terms of the States, Trump did a lot of shouting. Now, if you go back to Clinton, when all that stuff happened, with the potential impeachment of Clinton, looking back now, it seems, in comparison to what Mr. Trump has done, it seems quite mild, doesn't it?
I say that all the time, James. We we impeached the president and tried to oust him from office over sex. Okay, because let's come down to basic facts. That's what it was about. And now we're lacking to do that because a president abused power from helping an ally fight against pretty much our biggest, and I hate to use the word enemy in the aspect of like Putin and stuff like that, um, but ultimately they are, or our biggest adversary, I would say, and yet we're not finding the same justice, and it was very solemn that day. Um, to see your post and then to feel that what we were going through here in the U.S. And it is so much so for some, it riled up the base of people that want to see that, that like you said, read an article or see a news segment, and then not particularly state the facts. And I love you. It, People that know me outside of all this are going to laugh when they see this interview, because what I do for a living is I work in behavioral mental health, and I work with people who um, are very much grappling with dealing with their thoughts, feelings, and emotions because they're so intense, and at points that they're almost to a point where they can't um, get a hold of things. So those thoughts, feelings, and emotions become so strong that they think that it is fact. And I always tell people, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, while they may be intense, they may be coming from, deep down in your belly, and you feel so strongly passionate about it that you think that it's facts. Chances are it's probably not. And thoughts, feelings, and emotions are not facts. And I think people, the climate that we live in, worldwide, I think it's kind of like almost like an epidemic that people are, like you said, they're only within themselves and not thinking about how it affects the greater of society. And it was just something like when I saw your post that day, I almost got a lump in my throat because I was grappling with what was going on in our country that I didn't even realize. And I feel like I'm a person that kind of follows and is connected to things that are, not just within my country, but across the world. And I totally did not even realize in that moment that Brexit was kind of happening and coming to, the final, moments of being in the EU. And like it really like struck a chord with me, James. Like, here I am thousands of miles away and feeling like this is a moment in history, for lack of a better term for it all, that I probably never thought that I was going to be privy to in my lifetime. Maybe in my son's lifetime, maybe in my grandchildren's lifetime, but not necessarily in my own lifetime that I thought anything like that would happen. And then to see your post and thinking about how things were impacted outside of my bubble, you know what I mean, was very humbling.
I mean, I mean, as I said before, it's fascinating.
Hmm.
If you can look back at it in 100 years, it'll be fascinating for the people studying that. In terms of both of our, issues in our respective countries, that the, I mean, they're very much the emperor's new clothes.
Hmm.
And there's that. I know that most people are not stupid, because that would be too easy.
Hmm.
People can be willfully ignorant. And I'm sure if somebody who voted Leave for all of the reasons that I've mentioned before would watch this and go, well, it's Remainer tears, isn't it, or something like that. It's just bitter. You lost. Get over it. All that sort of unhelpful nonsense. Okay, well, just tell me what about your life was bad when we were in the EU, and they'll say whatever they say, and you go, okay, well, what about this? That doesn't make any sense, because those things don't add up, because they're not facts. They say, well, what are you going to get out of it? How is your life going to improve? Oh, we can get this. We can get the coal mining industry back together. Well, are we going to? Well, no, we're not, are we? You think this is going to solve problems? You think or people think that this is going to be the thing, this sort of magic bullet, this magic pill, that if we all swallow it, then yeah, things will be great. But it's just not true. And it
No.
doesn't take much to sort of pop that balloon of lies and misleading information and nonsense rhetoric. We've had Brexit means Brexit. That's nonsense. Let's get Brexit done. Let's find really easy sound bites that we can repeat,
Hmm.
and on both sides, so that the people who voted Leave can go get behind it and wave a flag and feel that something's going to happen, and great. And the people who will Remain are going to say, well, that doesn't mean anything, but it keeps the phrase trending on Twitter, or and it keeps it in people's minds. But it's
Hmm.
ultimately meaningless. We've had strong and stable. Brexit means Brexit. Get Brexit done. All these sort of things that don't mean it. But it sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
You could say table means table, and but it doesn't tell you anything. And it's like Trump saying, this is going to be the best thing. I'm the best thing. I know more about wardrobes than anybody. I know more about whatever than anybody. And to me, and I can only come at it from sort of my perspective, my history, my education, my bubble. But it sounds like a parody in
Hmm.
itself. But I can only see it from my sort of side. So you kind of go, well, how can I look at it from somebody else's perspective? How can I see it from there? What is he giving those people that like him and voted for him and support the pussy grabbing and all those kind of things? What is it? How can I get into their mindset?
Hmm.
Because he's giving hope, but it's not hope to me. But that's, people think it's hope.
Yeah,
Same
yeah,
with
absolutely.
think it's this is going to be the thing. This will be the thing that changes it. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if history is circular. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, study the past. There's a great David Niven story. I think he was in conversation with Churchill during the Second World War, and his generals are saying, Churchill was saying, this will happen, this certain thing will happen, and his generals were like, okay, great, okay, so we know. So David Niven said, well, how do you know? Because I study history, dear boy. Yeah, well, it's without wanting to quote Avril Lavigne, it's all been done before.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes around again. So the hope that I see is that after having someone like Obama in office, who I appreciate, nobody's going to be perfect. We've all got feet of clay in that regard, but a damn sight better than your current incumbent, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it all swings around, so it'll all go back round again. And if we
Mm-hmm.
can make it through the next however long that takes, both of our countries and indeed the world, then maybe on the other side of it, there'll be actual change and hope. Because after hope has to come change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've got hope.
No, yeah.
Will only last a certain amount of time.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And I do think you hit on a good point, that we can put all these superficial band-aids on really maybe significant issues, that are going on within our own countries, but putting on a dog and pony show, to incite people's feelings and negate their free thinking
Mm.
is something that I would have hoped at this point in and not only for myself. I think when you're a parent, and I have a young guy who's 18 and just kind of getting into the real world aspect, we tend to try to want to shelter them and wrap them in a bubble, to protect them from some of these things. And when you see that maybe that things are going to get a little bumpier before they kind of get better. I also believe that, history is cyclical and kind of, will always wrap back to the till its core beginning. So, I hope that we could, um, you know possibly see things simmer down, in again in my lifetime, where people are coming from a place of understanding and of wanting to evoke change. I look at, young minds like Greta Thunberg, who is nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and she's not even like 15 years old,
Yeah.
and that kind of gives me hope
Oh,
that,
she's incredible.
that yeah, that there are young minds, and conversations are being had with the younger generations, that they're demanding, change, and they want to see change within their lifetime, and that gives me instilled hope. So,
Yeah.
but James, before I let you go, I want you to tell us, what are some of the projects that we can look forward to that you got coming up.
Oh, I can answer that. I've actually worked recently. So there is a movie called Creation Stories, which I appear in, and that's directed by Nick Moran, who is, of course, also in Harry Potter. And that stars Ewan Bremner from Trainspotting. And it's based on Alan McGee's book Creation Stories, and it's scripted by Dean Kavanagh and Irvin Welsh. Obviously, Irvin Welsh, who did Trainspotting and T2, and
Love
many,
change.
yeah. Um, so they adapted the book, and it's Alan's life story, and Alan is co-founded Creation Records, who, long story short, discovered Oasis
Oh, cool.
back in the 1990s, which was a massive sort of sea change in terms of music in this country, and and what was popular. And there was interesting. There was also quite a political thing, because it was sort of jumped on by the political players of the day. One of whom was Tony Blair, who I play in
Okay.
Movie, which is me playing. Tony Blair is a bit of a divisive character over here. So some would argue that I'm playing the worst people of the 20th century. Some would argue. So I think that'll be coming out this year. That's in post-production now. There's also I'm doing a couple of low-budget movies. One's called Cold Fear, which is a horror, which we're shooting for next to no money, but with some people who do some amazing work on the Bond films and Star Wars and things. And another low-budget thing with a friend of mine called Ben Shockley, who it's called Dan Hawk Psychic Detective. It's sort of a spoof movie, which is quite fun to play. And I play a movie star or a TV star who wants to be in movies, who's just awful, obviously. And perhaps most excitingly for me, they're making a documentary about my life as it is, as an actor who goes around the world on conventions, but also, goes to work and tries to find whatever jobs that he can get to pay the bills. And that will be out this year, and that's called Who is James Payton?
Nice.
So if you follow me on Twitter, which is Mr. James Payton, and on Instagram, which is the James Payton, apparently, but TikTok not so much because it freaks me out. You'll be able to hear a bit more about those sort of things.
Cool.
But yeah, Who is James Payton and Creation Stories are the two projects that I've got rolling. They'll certainly be out this year, I think.
Awesome. Awesome. James, I look forward to your projects. I come across people that I meet doing this small little podcast that I just find fascinating. And then at the end of the interview, I'm totally engaged and even more fascinated about them, about who they are as a person. And that's a big reason why I do this, is because, we get to see what's on the screen or on in film or in music, but we rarely get to see an introspective kind of look. So I'm glad that you took your time to be on the show. I even am more so looking forward to the documentary, because I love documentaries about real people and their lives. I find it fascinating, and maybe it's because of the work that I do, but I find people's stories very extremely fascinating. So I appreciate, James, that you took the time to be on the Unnormalized podcast, and feel free, James, to make this a home for yourself, not only with stuff that you're doing in your field, but as things go on in the both of our governments, and things going on through what's going on in the state of today. I would love to have you back on to talk about some of those deeper discussions about things like that, because I really enjoyed the perspective from across the pond, and how we're looked at in the eyes of other people around this world. I find that extremely fascinating, because there's not a one world view or perspective of things, and I'm open to having dialogues with people about change and politics and government and stuff like that. This is not just, while pop culture is something that I absolutely love, worldviews and politics and all that kind of stuff is equally a passion and a love of mine. So I appreciate it that you kind of had that dialogue and that conversation with me. Appreciate you having on. And everybody, I'll post the links to how you can follow James on Twitter and on Instagram. I'll also post some links to some of the stuff he's been in, and maybe some projects that he has coming up, so everyone can kind of keep tabs. He's a very, very cool, multi-dimensional type of guy. And everybody, that's been the Unnormalized podcast with Frankie A and James. And everybody, get unnormalized.